Greetings, gents, and welcome to episode 14 of Econoclasm. Today I'm going to be talking about foreign aid, both in the recent scandal surrounding the U.S. Aid Department, or agency, rather, and just the concept of foreign aid in general, and why it's actually a really bad idea. So there was that huge uproar amongst the left and fans of the established government over Elon Musk and Doge going after the United States Agency for International Development, which is what the U.S. Aid Agency's acronym stands for. And you see this thing with the left a lot, where they like to take a name and assume that whatever it says is an objective truth. You saw this with Antifa. Antifa means anti-fascist, and if you're opposed to Antifa, cancel out the double negative, you're a fascist. Because they're just taking for granted that Antifa isn't evil and shit, and that if you oppose an organization, you just have to do a little grammatical work to find out that you're a fascist. But same with U.S. aid. They assume if you have any problem with it, you're opposed to the idea of aid and helping others and benefiting others. Because, well, the agency has aid in its name. And again, use the acronym. The A goes back to agency, so it should be USA ID, not US Aid. But they can't think outside the concept of, well, that's what the name says it is. But when you look into what US Aid funds were going to, it's insane and ridiculous. And if you did the reverse, essentially, you'd see leftists freaking out. Like, there was $500,000 for efforts to expand atheism in Nepal. Imagine how these people would be reacting if you were spending $500,000 to expand Christianity in a foreign country. They'd be flipping. But hey, you want to do atheism? That's perfectly fine. The ridiculous things that we're spending money on is outrageous. Just a short list from the whitehouse.gov. $1.5 million to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in Serbia's workplaces and business communities. $70,000 for production of a DEI musical in Ireland. $47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia. $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. $2 million for sex changes and LGBT activism in Guatemala. And the list goes on and on with various ridiculous leftist propaganda funding across the world with atheism, gay activism, transgender efforts, what have you. But they're freaking out that Trump's trying to stop it, because they have to force their worldview on everyone. And if you dare say that the government shouldn't be involved in forcing these ridiculous, mostly outright evil ideas on the world, then they attack you like you're a Nazi. Everyone's calling Elon Musk a Nazi. They're saying Trump's a Nazi. And this is the stuff that your tax dollars have been going to, that leftists are upset that now it's not. So remember, while you're struggling to buy groceries, save up for a house, or whatever essentials you need in life, remember that the government is taxing you, or at least has been taxing you, to spend the money for trans comic books, for expanding atheism, for a DEI musical. You can't afford to eat, but hey, at least more black people are getting hired in Serbia. So that's the important work that US aid is doing. That is so evil that Trump and Elon are taking down now. I'm very glad that they're going after it. I hope they completely collapse and just dismantle the agency as a whole, and anything like this just disappears. Trump's second term has been going remarkably better than his first. I guess he decided he wasn't going to play any sort of ball with his people, although his Israel policy is still bad, but US aid definitely clearly needed to go, and I'm glad it's gone. It's going. Hopefully it dies and never comes back. And when it comes to the concept of foreign aid as a whole, even if you take it as a legitimate foreign aid agency, where it actually gives money to legitimately benefit people in poor countries. When I said legitimately benefit, I mean legitimately benefit. You don't benefit from atheism, you don't benefit from trans or gay shit. But if it were to be actual aid like food and clothing, believe it or not, that's actually still bad. Now, important note to quick separation. In the events of like natural disaster or famine or something like that, that aid is still good. Because that's an immediate disaster where people absolutely need aid to benefit them. But if a country is simply poor, then things like food or clothing donations actually hurt the countries and perpetuate the cycle of poverty they're in. Because aid is obviously free. You just give it to them. It costs them nothing. It's given out of the kindness of the hearts of whoever's providing the aid. And even if a lot of times it is with legitimate noble intentions, the consequences end up being pretty bad. So when you have these poor countries who are trying to get out of poverty, you'll have budding sectors in food or clothing or other production that's trying to gain a foothold in the country that will allow people to start to pull themselves out of poverty through business production and establishing a business that can grow, hire more people, expand its operations, develop domestic industries that are vital to the survival and development of a growing country. But when you bring in this free aid, the burgeoning industries can't compete. Because why would I spend money on food when there's this free food here? So the local farmer goes out of business because no one's going to buy his food when there's free food available. So now a farm that could have developed growing productivity, sustained food growth, and provided consistent food to people, and provide jobs and help develop the economy, now doesn't exist. And so now the people have no choice but to rely on foreign aid for food because of past foreign aid suppressing the reduction of food in their country. Same thing happens with clothing, same thing happens with housing or most other basic necessities you need anywhere. And in these developing countries, it's of the most important. But these industries can't get off the ground to exist or compete because foreign aid suppresses their ability, and it makes it impossible for anyone to grow a business or grow an industry. And so no industries can develop, no industries can grow. So no domestic production or business or economy develops. So while foreign aid has a short-term beneficial impact where people can eat, it has a long-term, significantly more negative impact on the economy. Like I said, if there's just been a massive disaster, natural disaster, drought that killed all the crops because there was no water to provide for crops to actually grow to feed the people from domestic farmers, then yes, that is understandable. Help them out there because you're not suppressing the local economy, you're just saving them from death. But for the most part, foreign aid to poor countries makes them worse off, and you just perpetuate the poverty. So you need to continue with foreign aid. And it's an unending cycle that will never allow these places to be better and self-sufficient. Same reason they say not to feed wild animals. Not to compare poor countries to wild animals, but they become dependent on the easily accessible food, so they aren't able to go get it for themselves. And another point, people argue, we have to be, generous and kind, especially appeal for Christians that, Christ would want you to help those in need. And so if you're opposed to foreign aid, it's very unchristian. Well, it's important to note that any virtue must be voluntary. If you steal money from people through taxation and then give it, you're not being generous. Even though you may have some tax money taken from you to do that, and then you're saying, well, I'm being generous because of my taxes, it's still not generosity because it's not you don't have a choice in it, and all the other money isn't your money. You're taking it from people to donate. That's not generosity. Generosity is doing something yourself. A virtue is something you have to voluntarily choose to do on your own. I hear this a lot with people who are like, you're a Christian, you have to support forcing behavior on people. No. You're only good if you do something voluntarily. God doesn't force people to follow him, he gives them the choice. Just like he doesn't force people to be generous, he tells them, I want you to be generous, choose to do it of your own free will. Don't have someone else steal money from you and your neighbor and your neighbor's neighbor and have them be generous on your behalf. That's not generosity. So you can't defend foreign aid from that angle. The whole concept of taxation, social welfare, socialism, whatever, being Christian because it's generosity, is completely and utterly false. So that's going to do it for today. Short episode, but U.S. aid deserves to go away. Foreign aid, terrible idea. Generosity is only voluntary, not coerced through taxation.